The very first annual conference took place in Kigali, Rwanda, in 2019. At the conference in Kigali, it was unanimously decided that the conference for 2020 will hold in Accra, Ghana. Alas, COVID broke. Our world was turned upside down. The new normal came, and our lives have not been the same ever since. So of course we couldn't hold that conference. The conference was now postponed to 2021. But even then, 2021, things were still a bit hazy. So we decided to have a virtual conference in 2021, which most of you here participated in. And so finally, here we are in person holding the third annual conference of this August association. A lot of people have wondered why African Arbitration Association? What is the whole hula-baloo about? Let me just say that over the years, many African countries have realized that apart from easing the mode of doing business, one of the keys to encouragement of investment and business development is to implement effective dispute resolution mechanisms. Accordingly, many African countries have entered into bilateral and multilateral treaties providing for international arbitration. Some have acceded to the New York Convention on enforcement and recognition of foreign arbitral awards. Some have even adopted the UNCITRAL model rules and law into their local legislations. And of course, experienced businessmen and women have long relied on international commercial arbitration, both ad hoc and institutional, to circumvent recourse to national courts in event of a dispute. Naturally, no foreigner would have confidence in your local courts. It's only a natural feeling anyway. So while many are familiar with institutional arbitration at the ICC, the LCIA, AAA, and various arbitral bodies, experienced businessmen and women doing business in Africa are less familiar with regional arbitral bodies and the practice of arbitration in general. So, to therefore turn this trend, this body was set up with the sole purpose of enhancing and promoting, encouraging, and facilitating the use of international arbitration to build an enabling environment for investment and sustainable development within the African continent. So that is basically our goal, in addition to all other objectives which you can find in the constitution of the association. It's on the website. Our membership is open to all Africans and non-Africans alike, to the whole world, as long as you meet the criteria prescribed in the AFA Constitution. Membership benefits include biannual printed journal, conferences such as the one you are sitting in now, seminars, directory of members, AFA news, website access, and involvement in AFAA activities, amongst others. So I want to enjoin anyone here present this evening who has not enrolled as a member of the AFA to do so today. Just go on the website and the whole procedure, is there. Since this evening will be my last conference in which I'm going to preside over the activities of the association, having been president for the last 4 years. As a matter of fact, my tenure was supposed to end last year after 3 years, but because of the COVID and the extenuating circumstances, my colleagues on the board resolved by the powers of the Constitution to extend my tenure by another 1 year. So since this will be my last conference as president, because my tenure actually ends at 12 midnight on Saturday, the 5th of November, 2022. I want to express my sincere thanks and appreciation to all those who have, one way or the other, been involved in the establishment of the AFA. You're all too numerous to mention. I don't want to start mentioning names. I've done that in the past conferences. But let me particularly mention Judge Alkawi Yusuf, the former president of the International Court of Justice, for his guidance. This evening, we are privileged to have the former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, PhD, GCFR, to give the keynote address and declare this conference open. President Obasanjo, in his usual self, had concluded arrangements to be here in person, but the exigencies of his assignment as the African Union High Representative for the Horn of Africa has made this impossible. This is so because earlier today, for those of you who have been monitoring the news, he presided over the peace talks between Ethiopia and the Tigray region. It is ongoing right now in Pretoria. Hence, he will be addressing us virtually. I want to, on your behalf, express our deep appreciation to His Excellency for finding the time within his busy schedule to address us virtually this evening. I'm also delighted that the Honorable, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Godfred Yeboah-Dame, is here with us today to give us a goodwill message for the conference. When I contacted him that this conference is being hosted here and that would he be kind enough to give us a goodwill message, he looked at his schedule and he was actually supposed to be in Norway today. But he had to rearrange that schedule and actually just arrived back from Norway to be here today. So I want to, on your behalf, thank you, sir, for finding time to be here to join us this evening. Before I conclude my short remarks, I hope I've not been speaking for too long anyway. All right. Because I do recall when I was a student, my professor once told me that, Bayo, if you're invited to give a speech, a research has been done for attention span of people. So always think of a lady's skirt. So I was wondering, what has a lady's skirt got to do with speaking? He said, your speech should be short enough to be attractive and long enough to cover the subject matter. So I hope I haven't spoken for too long. Before I conclude, let me thank my fellow board members and members of the host planning committee for their hard work in putting this conference together. I want to particularly mention Mr. Fue Chikata, for his role in what looks to be a very, very successful conference. Let me also thank you all for finding time within your very, very busy schedules, leaving your family and work to be here today with us. Without you, this conference would definitely have not been possible. In line with our determination to be inclusive, our conference for next year will take place in Cape Town, South Africa. So I want you all to save that date. And also, the conference for 2024 will be in a Francophone country. I can see dear raising her hands there. The details of this are still being worked out. So when the details have been worked out, you'll be informed accordingly. In conclusion, let me join you all to enjoy the sights and sounds of the beautiful city of Accra and beyond. Honorable Atonjas, I'm marketing Ghana for you. I have been reminded that in line with Chatham House rules, whatever happens in Accra remains in Accra. So, ladies and gentlemen, long live the EFA, and I want to thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chief Bayo. I did encourage people to read the profiles of the speakers. But there's one thing I also have to admit, that these profiles are generally not the true reflection of the speakers, of the people, because what his profile doesn't say at all is that Chief Bayo is a fantastic musician. For those of us who were in Kigali in 2019, the same evening like this at the AGM, there was a cocktail and there was a live band. None of us knew how beautifully he can sing. So he turned up, joined the band, and he sang so beautifully. And who can remember what he sang? If anybody gets it right, I get you a pint this evening. No, he sang No Woman, No Cry. I think that was a warming, the key one was No Woman, No Cry. And so please do me a favor, if you have the opportunity to speak to him one-to-one in the course of the evening, encourage him to sing for us again tonight. So thank you so much for the brilliant speech. I think from what you've said, we've seen how Alpha has grown from strength to strength, and we hope and pray that it continues to do so as the years go by. I'm now going to invite the next speaker. Again, I'll fall in the same trap to encourage people to look at the profile, because I won't be able to read all of it now. And again, it's not a true reflection, because what he has achieved goes many, many more miles than what the profile attempts to suggest. I'll call for Honorable Godfrey Yeboah, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Republic of Ghana, to say a few words by way of goodwill message. Honorable.
Thank you very much. Good evening. The keynote speaker, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, who is not here, but by dint of technology, I'm supposed to acknowledge him, because indeed you'll be seeing him. The President of the African Arbitration Association, Chief Bayo Ojo, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, indeed I'm related to deliver a message of solidarity at this event. I take the opportunity to welcome you as the host country's Attorney General and Minister for Justice to our beautiful capital. Accra's diverse, rich, and vibrant sociocultural life is casting story. And I entreat you over the course of your stay to explore the abundant shades of Ghana's fascinating culture. And I will no doubt that indeed you'll be left in awe. I observe that in its short period of existence, the African Arbitration Association is steadily carving a reputation as the continent's voice on arbitration. Through the various meetings, workshops, and annual conferences, this organization has contributed to the deepening of the culture, understanding, and practice of arbitration on the continent. And I salute the efforts of leaders of the association, particularly Chief Bayo Ojo. As I understand, this is the first time your annual conference is being held physically since 2019, after the onset of COVID-19. It is thus refreshing to know that lawyers on the continent and stakeholders in the business climate of Africa can meet in person and that the event can proceed in a physical form. And I dare say that you could not have had a better place for a return to physical annual conferences than Ghana. This country's formidable track record in democracy, rule of law, relatively good governance over the past 30 years, indeed position Ghana as a destination of choice for investment with residual benefits for infrastructural growth. International commercial disputes are a necessary consequence of this phenomenon, and Ghana has had its fair share of same in the recent past. And what strikes me about the changes forced upon the world by COVID-19 is that dispute resolution is inevitable. In the teeth of COVID-19, international arbitration continued. I recall that in 2020, on 2 different occasions at this very hotel, I led state attorneys conduct virtual trials in 2 different international arbitration hearings over a 1-week period, each in some matters affecting the state, with the participants in both trials sitting in Italy, England, the United States of America, Nigeria, and Ghana at the same time. Dispute resolution, particularly arbitration, is indeed unavoidable. And I think that as a host at NGOA, I deem it appropriate to share a few thoughts on arbitration, especially the subject matter, or some of the topics that you'll be treated to. So if I would entreat you not to be too bored. Litigation and dispute resolution in Africa has indeed evolved from the traditional dispute resolution mechanism of referral to the family or tribal head with appellate structures leading up to a chief's palace. More complex mechanisms for resolving disputes are now in place and must be explored by the practitioner. Most countries now have a 4-tier structure for conflict resolution in their superior court. However, as we all know, the rapidly evolving business space in Africa has necessitated the development of parallel structures in the nature of arbitration fora for the resolution of disputes. As practitioners, we fail to learn the rudiments of international arbitration at our own peril. I say that whether it is arbitration or the traditional court system, a justice system must guarantee transparency, certainty, and fairness. As counsel to the Republic in various arbitration proceedings against the state, I can assert that there have been many instances where African countries have been at the receiving end of huge arbitral awards, unfairly delivered in favor of big foreign multinationals, in circumstances which show a disregard for the context in which the agreements in question were negotiated. It is for this reason that I find the theme chosen for your conference, Africanization of dispute resolution, very appropriate. We cannot but strengthen the mechanisms for resolution of commercial disputes in our respective countries, since a robust legal system, in my respectful view, goes hand in hand with economic prosperity. The setting up of a fair and efficient system for commercial disputes adjudication must therefore sit right at the top of our developmental agenda. It's about time we fully recognize that international arbitration can occur in our own countries. It need not be on foreign land. Arbitration is international not because of the forum or place of hearing, but largely because the parties involved in the underlying transaction. I'm happy to note that Africa is developing its own international arbitration fora. The Mauritius Court of International Arbitration is a full-fledged entity and is doing very well in commercial dispute resolution. The Lagos Court of Arbitration, established in 2009, is also doing great. Coming home, it is worthy to note that Ghana's Alternative Dispute Resolution Act 2010, at 798, provides for the setting up of an arbitration center. Even though we have an arbitration center, that center is currently privately owned. As Deputy Attorney General in November 2018, I stated at the International Bar Association's Dispute Resolution Conference that there's a need to make Ghana a highly respected home for arbitration in Ghana, in Africa, and whose arbitration awards are effectively enforced worldwide. The time has come for us to implement Section 114 of Act 798 by setting up a state-owned and state-funded Ghana Alternative Dispute Resolution Center, which will provide a modern, reliable, and business-friendly mechanism for resolving investment, infrastructure, and commercial disputes in the country and throughout the African continent. I know that some practitioners will point to the existence of the current arbitration center, but that center, as I said, is owned and run by a private entity. Act 798 requires the state to establish their own arbitration center. The obligation of the state to set up and fund a national arbitration center is thus statutory, and we must obey same. The main argument opposition to this is familiar to me, that arbitration is private, and therefore the state has no business running an arbitration center. I say in answer that the state sets up and fully funds courts for private people, and the state even assesses these courts and has judgment given against her in the same court. The case against the state-owned arbitration center is thus, in my very respectful view, weak. Towards implementing Section 114 of Act 798, when I assumed office as Attorney General in 2021, I tasked a group of senior lawyers reputed for the conduct of arbitration in this country to devise practical steps to set up the center. I will not mention names, but to date I have not received any report or suggestions whatsoever. I remain committed to this, and to realize this vision, I have charged Mrs. Nanya Saki or Mrs. Nanya Usu Ankoma to constitute a team which will advise me on practical ways to set up the arbitration center. Africa's quest for infrastructure, a market to export commodities, and an atmosphere for trade will necessarily involve interactions between states and states, states and individuals, states and corporations, and corporations and corporations, and of course, corporations and individuals. These levels of relationships will definitely result in conflict. The launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area represents an opportunity to Africa to manifest to the world the strength of its potential and the entrepreneurial spirit to the people. And of course, you all know the headquarters of the AFTA is located right here in Accra. Providing a large market space connecting 1.3 billion people and creating a 3.4 trillion economic bloc, it will boost commerce within the African continent. But dispute will be a byproduct. The recently established dispute settlement body protocol under the AFTA, which I was privileged to launch in Accra in April 2021, monitors and evaluates the dispute settlement mechanism under the AFTA. It is composed of representatives of all state parties and is set up to be fast, efficient, rules-based, and transparent. I urge African lawyers to quickly familiarize themselves with the protocol and rules of a dispute settlement body so as to be of help to their respective countries. May I not bore you further. I know that you will leave here richer on account of the depth of understanding of the international legal arena possessed by your well-renowned speakers. Africa definitely will be the winner. I'm grateful for the opportunity to make these few remarks. And indeed, I will entreat you to also enjoy the nightlife of Accra, the various places of interest. Readily, I can remember Kozo, Santoku, Sky Bar, Twist, and what have you. If you need more, I refer you to Nanya.
Thank you so much. And just one last thing, I'm going to take you on the place where they dance, bottle dance. So if you could let me know, that will be the place to be maybe tomorrow after the session. Now we've got the keynote speaker now, Chief Obasanjo, the former president of Nigeria. Chief Bayo has already explained to us why he cannot be here with us today. But nevertheless, we have his profile in our bundle. I think it is at page 7. It carries on to page 9. and it could carry on as long as, the history has been. So I'll encourage you to find time and read that profile. In the meantime, we will hear from him virtually, and may I ask the ICT team please to bring him virtually.
Distinguished participants, good evening. Let me start by thanking the African Arbitration Association for inviting me to give this keynote speech on the occasion of the 2022 annual conference of the association in Accra, here in Ghana. I understand that the theme of the conference is Africanization of distinguished participants. Good evening. Distinguished participants, good evening. Let me start by thanking the African Arbitration Association. Distinguished participants, good evening. Distinguished participants, good evening. Let me start by thanking the African Arbitration Association for inviting me to give this keynote speech on the occasion of the 2022 annual conference of the association in Accra, here in Ghana. I understand that the theme of the conference is Africanization of international dispute resolution. This, for me, is very apt, considering my current role as the African Union High Representative for the Horn of Africa. This role, which I assumed since August 2021, is part of the AU's initiative to promote peace, security, and stability in the Horn of Africa. Since then, I've engaged with relevant political actors and stakeholders in the region with a view to entrenching lasting peace and stability in the area. Only last week, I led the AU mediation team to the first formal peace talks geared towards resolving the lingering war between Ethiopia and its Tigray region in Pretoria, South Africa. We are still engaged in discussing, and we are looking at things with possibility of a breakthrough. This will explain why I am unable to be physically present with you to give this address. And I hope you do understand. Since the African Arbitration Association is concerned with promoting dispute resolution in Africa, this accords well with my current role for the AU, which is principally that of employing mediation to bring enduring peace to the troubled parts of our continent. This is very important because it is only when there is peace that progress can be achieved and prosperity and security can be guaranteed. 4 years ago, an epochal continental event took place in Kigali, Rwanda on 21st March 2018, when the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was adopted and opened for signature. As you might already be aware, the agreement entered into force on 30th May 2019, and at the 12th Extraordinary Summit of the African Union held in Niamey, Niger Republic on 7th July 2019, the operational phase of the Free Trade Area was launched. 5 key instruments were adopted with the launch, and they are the rule of origin, the tariff concessions, the online mechanism on monitoring, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, and the African Trade Observatory. The significance of the ACFTA cannot be overemphasized. Given our continent's current population of 1.2 billion people, for 55 countries, ACFTA is now the largest free trade area worldwide since the establishment of the World Trade Organization on 1st January 1995. It is expected that there will be increase in trade among African countries beyond the 18% currently going on. Production in the real sector, like manufacturing and agro-allied processing, will be stimulated through the development of new value chains. This is very important with the recent experience of the disruption of the world value chain as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. Apart from strengthening our continent's economy, it will enable African companies to access and supply world markets. Incidentally, 8 African countries, Cameroon, Egypt, Ghana, Mauritius, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Tunisia, have started trading under the ACFTA, having gotten their tariffs on goods approved. Only a few weeks ago, Kenya shipped its first consignment of locally made batteries to Ghana. I understand some Kenya coffee was also included in the shipment. No doubt, other African countries are on similar track. This is quite impressive, and it is a good beginning. The relevance of these continental developments must not be lost on your association. Going by part of your lofty objectives, which is to, I quote, advance the use of international arbitration and alternative dispute resolutions as effective methods of dispute resolution of Africa-related transactions and disputes. End of quotation. You are primed to play a significant role in resolving resultant intra-trade disputes between countries in our continent and eventually companies within the region as well. We must never forget that the dispute resolution originally emanated from Africa. I recall while growing up in my village how the village head and elders used to settle disputes between members of the community. Their decision was binding on all members of the community, and appropriate punishment and sanctions were meted out for infractions. Sometimes restitution was prescribed in the form of providing a goat or certain farm produce by the offender. In extreme cases, excommunication from the society was part and parcel of a decision. These dispute resolutions by the village heads and elders were very efficient and helped in no small measure to ensure peace and stability in the various communities. I understand this is now referred to as customary arbitration. I therefore call on your association to explore the possibility of elevating customary arbitration to the level where it will be employed in resolving most of our intercommunal and inter-ethnic disputes in Africa. This is part of what my role entails as the AU High Representative for the Horn of Africa. We must be able to resolve our disputes ourselves in a peaceful and orderly manner, devoid of rancor and ill will. We must also put in place early warning and confidence building mechanisms to prevent conflict. One important aspect of customary arbitration is that it is win-win for all parties. No victor, no vanquished. We are all winners. This brings me to what we did to achieve peace after the decision in the land and maritime boundary case between Cameroon and Nigeria, otherwise known as the Bakassi case, before the International Court of Justice. This case was initiated by the government of the Republic of Cameroon against the Federal Republic of Nigeria on 29 March 1994. It relates essentially to the question of sovereignty over the Bakassi Peninsula and the delimitation of the maritime boundary between the states, which had remained a partial one and which, despite many attempts to complete, the two parties have been unable to do so. The court decided that the boundary between the Republic of Cameroon and the Federal Republic of Nigeria was delimited by the Anglo-German Agreement of 11 March 1913. Thus, the sovereignty over Bakassi Peninsula lies with the Republic of Cameroon. With regard to the issue on state responsibilities raised by the parties, the court held that each party is under an obligation expeditiously and without condition to withdraw its administration and its military and police forces from territories which fall within the sovereignty of Cameroon. The social implications of the judgment are that Nigerians who had lived in Bakassi all their lives had to face the sad reality of having to evacuate a region that is part and parcel of them, but no longer their own region. Most people living in that area had businesses located there, and so leaving the area meant detaching them from their sources of income. Moreover, all infrastructural facilities, including hospitals, schools, recreational centers, and so on, that were originally put in place by the Nigerian government were to be forfeited, resulting in monumental loss of income. Another far-reaching implication of the judgment is the strategic or security implication for the Nigerian state. The ICJ judgment made Nigeria lose its eastern access to the Atlantic. This implied that without Cameroon's approval, Nigeria's naval ships cannot move freely to southern Africa. This was certainly not in the interest of the Nigerian nation. It is gratifying to note that the judgment delivered on 10th October 2002 by the ICJ met two willing parties. Nigeria's commitment to Africa Brotherhood was already noted in its foreign policy objectives. On the part of Cameroon, it already made an undertaking to abide by the judgment of the court, even at the hearing stage of the case. This undertaking was noted and adopted by the court in its judgment. According to the court, it, I quote, takes note of the commitment undertaken by the Republic of Cameroon at the hearings that faithful to its traditional policy of hospitality and tolerance, it will continue to afford protection to Nigerians living in the Bakassi Peninsula and in the Lake Chad area. End of quotation. This showed the disposition of Cameroon to the friendly and peaceful implementation of the judgment. What is most significant is that about a month before the date fixed for the judgment, at the invitation of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Kofi Annan, President Paul Biya of Cameroon and I met in Paris on 5th September 2002 to discuss Bakassi Peninsula and other issues. In the communique issued at the end of the meeting, both of us agreed to respect and implement the decision of the ICJ on the Bakassi Peninsula and establish an implementation mechanism with the support of the United Nations. We also agreed on the need for confidence-building measures, including the eventual demilitarization of the peninsula, with the possibility of internal observers to monitor the withdrawal of troops, an early visit to Nigeria of President Biya, and the avoidance of inflammatory statements or declarations on the Bakassi issue by either side. Thus, before the judgment was handed down, both parties and the United Nations were already expectant of its delivery, and preparations were put in place for implementation. The role of Mr. Kofi Annan is especially commendable for his ability to identify the potential danger posed to Africa and the world in the event of non-implementation of the judgment, and the foresight to take even anticipatory steps in preventive diplomacy. Preventive diplomacy refers to action to prevent disputes from arising, to resolve them before they escalate into conflicts, or to limit the spread of conflicts when they occur. The United Nations monitors carefully political developments around the world to detect threats to international peace and security, thereby enabling the Security Council to carry out or to foster preventive action. Envoys and special representatives of the Secretary General are engaged in preventive diplomacy and mediation throughout the world to help reconcile parties in conflict. In many cases, this work is undertaken in close cooperation with regional organizations. In close, ladies and gentlemen, let me once again thank the Africa Arbitration Association for inviting me to give this keynote speech. It is now my honor and pleasure to declare your 2022 annual conference open. I wish you very fruitful and successful deliberations. Thank you for listening. Distinguished participants.
Thank you. May I say that His Excellency has actually delivered a very thoughtful keynote speech. But one thing that he said quite a few times was the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The Minister of Justice of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency Dame, also mentioned the Continental Free Trade Agreement quite a few times in his speech. This morning, for those of us who used our time wisely and productively, we were at Keplinski Hotel, where the ICC had organized an outstanding event where the Secretary General of AFTA spoke extensively about the Continental Free Trade Agreement. So it should tell us something, that it is important. I know in Africa, good news travels very slowly. But what I'll ask and urge everyone to take home is that the AFTA has come to stay. It is a game changer, and I know we all love it for various reasons. Arbitrators, you're smiling because of the disputes that will come out of it. And of course, the business people, they're happy because they could carry their goods left, right, and center. In any event, we all love it. It is the biggest trade agreement in the world. And no doubt it is going to generate loads of dispute. Not that we want dispute. Of course, we want things to be done peacefully. But as a matter of course, the man who loves the woman, they get married, always dispute. So as arbitrators, brace yourselves for, for the dispute. Now, may I invite... I instructed that I should turn the reverse gear and inform everyone that His Excellency Yeboah haven't come back because of us today, bearing in mind the long list of things he has to do. He has to take off now. May we acknowledge his leave by... And why don't we rise for him as he leaves the hall? Why don't we just give him the... Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Okay. So I was going to invite Dr. Onyema to come and launch the SOAS 2022 Arbitration in Africa survey. And for that, she has up to 7.5 minutes.
Of which he has taken one of them. So I'm just going to hand over to our sponsors. Those of you who were at our conference yesterday, you got the QR code, and so we hope that you have looked at it. You can't do research without funds. And we've heard so much about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and all of that, but we do need to do more research. And so I'm not going to speak because I guess you must be tired of hearing my voice, but those who paid for our 2022 research and who supported the work we're doing are the ones who would speak to you. So I'm going to hand over to Rob and Daniel.
Thanks, Amelia, and good evening, everyone. It's a great honour to be here at this gathering of esteemed African arbitration practitioners. And we're here to launch the 2022 SOAS Arbitration in Africa Survey Report, entitled African Connected Arbitration Perspectives on Major Global Issues. As Amelia mentioned, there are flyers dotted around, hopefully with QR codes where you can download it. If not, do go onto the SOAS website. It's a really good read. As Amelia mentioned, Pinsent Masons have co-sponsored the report and the survey with Broderick Bosimo and Co. from Nigeria. And I'll just set the scene to the report, and then Daniel will take us through a summary of the main findings. I'm Rob Wilkins. I'm a partner with Pinsent Masons International Arbitration Group. I'm based in London, but I worked for a number of years and lived for a number of years in Sudan, and most of my practice is focused on the continent of Africa. As a purpose-led professional services business, Pinsent Masons prides itself on championing change and promoting progress. We've long been proponents of diversity in international arbitration, and that includes efforts around Africanization. And we're very proud of our association with SOAS and the work going into this survey and report. And this is not about altruism. This is because Africa is highly relevant and is going to become increasingly relevant on the world stage. We heard yesterday that it's estimated $520 billion worth of infrastructure projects are currently ongoing on the continent right now. And that's partly due to the infrastructure deficit that exists, but also due to the fact that Africa's home to the fastest growing and fastest urbanizing population in the world. And that growth is driving demand for water, for power, for transport. And those needs are being met by infrastructure projects which are often complex, which are often implemented over a number of years, and which often involve an international element. So for all of those reasons and more, international arbitration is going to play a role in the disputes that inevitably will arise on those projects. So arbitration in Africa is very relevant, and this report is extremely timely. Just to set the scene as to what the report covers, the survey sought to present the views of African arbitration practitioners on a number of global and continent-wide events. Firstly, to understand the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on arbitral practice in Africa, and also to look at the preparedness and awareness of African practitioners around climate change. Now, those two issues are not new, they've been looked at before, but what's unique about this survey and report is that they're being looked at from an African perspective and providing much needed African voices on those issues. The survey also looked at whether the expected increase in construction disputes was starting to filter through and how those disputes were indeed being resolved. And finally, we've heard a lot about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and the survey sought the respondents' views on the level of awareness and how the free trade agreement is expected to impact on their practices. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Daniel, who will run you through a summary of the findings.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to I'll go straight to the findings, but first I'll introduce myself and my firm. My name is Daniel Inweze. I work with Broderick Bozema & Company. Broderick Bozema & Company is a firm in Nigeria, a boutique law firm focused in arbitration, commercial arbitration and litigation. Now, because we're a firm that's interested in the development of arbitration in Africa, and we believe that at the backbone of that is data gathering and the work that Dr. Emilia is currently doing. So that's why the partnership was an easy one for us to get into. Thank you very much, Dr. Emilia. Now, the scope of the research has already been shared, so I'll just go straight. We have very few minutes, but before I start, I'll simply say that whatever I'm going to say would not cover the report. So please download the report and read. So for the COVID-19, we noticed that arbitration continued even during the COVID-19 period. Protocols came out, but we specifically looked at the AAA protocol, and we found that there was a level of engagement and awareness of that protocol. There were also other challenges like technical issues during that period, which made some arbitration proceedings stop. Some continued with so much challenges, and some had to suspend until the end of the pandemic. I'll go straight to climate change. Climate change, a vast majority reported that climate affected the practice of arbitration in Africa, while about 37% said even though it affected, they felt climate change was more of a broader issue that affects everybody than specifically arbitration. However, those who believe that climate change affected the practice of arbitration have started taking steps to reduce their carbon footprint within the African community. Now, there's been a rise in infrastructure and construction disputes, and as such, there's also been a rise of infrastructure projects and construction projects, as well as disputes. Definitely, because there are projects going on, there'll be disputes coming up from it. But arbitration has been seen to be the most preferred means for settling these disputes. And this is because of the complex nature of the kind of disputes that emanate from these transactions. And finally, the African Free Trade Agreement, it cannot be overemphasized, is important. And within the scope of what the survey covered, we found out that the African Free Trade Agreement the protocol for settlement of disputes doesn't cover non-state parties. And parties and respondents felt that arbitration would be the best way to settle disputes emanating between individuals in those kinds of transactions. There was also a question as to whether African commercial courts should be established to settle disputes emanating from individual parties engaging under the African Free Trade Agreement. Now, I will close by just reading a statement from one of the respondents. The respondent said, an African commercial court would raise questions of how judges are appointed and their impartiality and the cost of setting up such a court, enforcement of their decisions and judgment. Thank you very much. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you, SOAS. Thank you, Alpha. We are really grateful.
All right, thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of this session. So the next thing that we have lined up is the drinks reception. Please remember what I said earlier on. I know the president has said what happens in Ghana remains in Ghana, but people should drink responsibly so that we don't get up with hangover. We've got a busy day tomorrow and after tomorrow. So if you have a glass or two, that is fine. I understand the drinks reception would be the drinks the outside of the building. So just outside the reception. So you can't miss it. By the swimming, you can't miss it. Just follow the crowd and you'll find you find it. So if you just take a leaf in an orderly fashion and follow the ushers who should be outside there now waiting to take you people to the drinks reception. And we look forward to seeing you there.